I'll begin. And go back a couple of pages. So, to refresh our understanding a little. And we will see, we ended with that beautiful passage about a wider consciousness opening than its doors.
Can you tell the page number, Narad?
Pardon?
Can you tell the page number?
Yeah, page 48. Okay. So we begin. Savitri, Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. I remember we ended last time before our summer break with that marvelous passage that ends with the timeless glory stooping a while to commune with our seized, illumined clay, and how it leaves its huge white stamp upon our lives. When we have that experience of the divine presence touching us, this is what Sri Aurobindo is telling us. And then we will begin now with the line, in the oblivious field of mortal mind. And the reason that it's an oblivious field is because it's a mind that is still in the ignorance. It hasn't been able to evolve out of this lowest status of the ignorance, which is body, life, and mind. So it's an oblivious field. One day when we rise higher, it will no longer be oblivious. But here, Sri Aurobindo says, revealed to the closed prophet eyes of trance, or in some deep internal solitude, witnessed by a strange, immaterial sense, the signals of eternity appear. The truth mind could not know unveils its face. We hear what mortal ears have never heard. We feel what earthly sense has never felt. We love what common hearts repel and dread. Our minds hush to a bright omniscient. A voice calls from the chambers of the soul. We meet the ecstasy of the Godhead's touch in golden privacies of immortal fire. This is when we have risen above body, life, and mind into the status of the spiritual realms of consciousness that begin with the higher mind and proceed upwards through the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, the overmind, and finally the supermind. So right now, we are hearing this voice calling from the chambers of the soul. Privacy is the plural of something private, and it's the British pronunciation of the word Americans or Europeans might call privacies. These signs are native to a larger self that lives within us, by ourselves unseen. And that's why Sri Aurobindo speaks of all these veils that are in front of us, hiding the true being which is the soul, which is the divine presence and the divine. So now we see that sometimes a holier influence comes, and a tide of mightier surgings bears our lives, and a diviner presence moves the soul. If any of us have had an experience with Mother or Sri Aurobindo, that's exactly what he is talking about. But there's more. Or through the earthly coverings, something breaks. A grace and beauty of spiritual light, the murmuring tongue of a celestial fire. Our self and a high stranger whom we feel, it is and acts unseen, as if it were not. It follows the line of sempiternal birth, yet seems to perish with its mortal frame. So this is a very, very important passage. When something breaks through our earthly coverings, and it is actually a grace and beauty of spiritual light, ourself and a high stranger. The high stranger is our inner being, our psychic being, whom we feel. It is and acts unseen as if it were not. And that is the case for almost 99% of humanity. That occasionally we may have a glimpse of this high stranger, but very rarely. And therefore it is in us, it is us, but it acts unseen as if it were not. And yet it follows the line of sempiternal birth. Now the word sempiternal means enduring forever, everlasting, yet seems to perish with its mortal frame. And this has been the understanding of science, philosophy, most religions, that everything perishes with our mortal frame, and we have the possibility of going into heaven or perishing and going into hell. But the next line is very critical. Assured of the apocalypse to be. Now, what does Nolini tell me? He says, the finality that is to happen, the divine manifestation. This is promised to everyone. We will all be in the divine manifestation. The only proviso is that it may take some time. For some, it may take a year, 2, 3 years. For some, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Doesn't matter. We are promised that we will all be in that apocalypse. Assured of the apocalypse to be, it reckons not the moments and the hours. Great, patient, calm, it sees the centuries pass, awaiting the slow miracle of our change. In the sure, deliberate process of world force and the long march of all-revealing time. Well, what Sri Aurobindo is telling us here is that the psychic being, the eternal divine presence in us, does not reckon, does not consider the moments and the hours. It is great, it is patient, it is calm, and it even sees the centuries pass, because it's awaiting the slow miracle of our change. And that miracle of our change is the transformation of our nature into a divine nature. In the sure, deliberate process of world force and the long march of all-revealing time, it is the origin and the master clue, a silence overhead, an inner voice, a living image seated in the heart, an unwalled wideness, and a fathomless point. The truth of all these cryptic shows in space, cryptic, mysterious in meaning, puzzling, ambiguous, secret. The real, capital R, towards which our strivings move. And in the Life Divine, the Sri Aurobindo tells us about this real, because you see he capitalizes it. And the real is often synonymous with the gnosis or the supermind. I quote, "From our ascending point of view, we may say that the real is behind all that exists. It expresses itself intermediately in an ideal which is a harmonized truth of self. The ideal throws out a phenomenal reality of variable conscious being, which inevitably draws towards its own essential reality, tries at last to recover it entirely, whether by a violent leap or normally through the ideal which put it forth. It is this that explains the imperfect reality of human existence as seen by the mind. The instinctive aspiration in the mental being towards a perfectibility ever beyond itself, towards the concealed harmony of the ideal and the supreme surge of the spirit beyond the ideal to the transcendental." The secret, grandiose meaning of our lives. Now, grandiose in Sri Aurobindo's time was never pejorative. It was always positive, characterized by greatness or scope of intent. So this secret, grandiose meaning of our lives. And Sri Aurobindo wants us to know even more about this. And in these beautiful lines, a treasure of honey in the combs of God, a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak, tenebrous, dark, and gloomy. It is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight, an immortality cowled in the cape of death. Whoa. So we are immortal, but we are cowled, we are hooded in the cape of death. The shape of our unborn divinity. Now he's going to tell us something so powerful. that we should never forget. It guards for us our fate in depths within, where sleeps the eternal seed of transient things, transient, passing with time. Now, always we bear in us a magic key, concealed in life's hermetic envelope. Yes, it's certainly something airtight, hermetic, certainly something that is not affected by outward influence or power. He continues, a burning witness in the sanctuary, regards through time and the blind walls of form. A timeless light is in his hidden eyes. And as we go through Savitri, I often pause and quote Sri Aurobindo and the Mother about the terms that he uses in the integral yoga. So we have two quotes that are so magnificent. Our sense, by its incapacity, has invented darkness. In truth, there is nothing but light. Only it is a power of light, either above or below our poor human vision's limited range. For do not imagine that light is created by the suns. The suns are only physical concentrations of light, but the splendor they concentrate for us is self-born and everywhere. God is everywhere, and wherever God is, there is light. And this quote from the Mother was sent to my dear friend Dmitri von Morenschild. And he gave me that copy. The light is everywhere. The force is everywhere. And the world is so small. He sees the secret things no words can speak, and knows the goal of the unconscious world, and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. But all is screened, subliminal, mystical. So subliminal in the integral yoga means existing or operating below the threshold of consciousness. And Sri Aurobindo gives us excellent definitions, which I need to share with you. One in the life divine. The real subconscious is a nether diminished consciousness, close to the inconscient. The subliminal is a consciousness larger than our surface existence. Imagine that. Larger than our surface existence. But both belong to the inner realm of our being, of which our surface is unaware. So both are jumbled together in our common conception and parlance. And one from a letter on yoga. Sri Aurobindo was pounded with questions from disciples, and he would stay up all night and write answers. And now we have 5 books of his answers, huge books. And eventually there'll be 6 and 7 or 8, because when disciples or devotees pass away and the children have no interest in the yoga, they usually send all the letters to the archives of the ashram. So from a letter on yoga. Subliminal is a general term used for all parts of the being which are not on the waking surface. Subconscious is very often used in the same sense by European psychologists because they do not know the difference. But when I use the word, now this is very interesting. Sri Aurobindo rarely uses the first person, and this is one of those rare instances. But when I use the word, I mean always what is below the ordinary physical consciousness, not what is behind it. The inner mental, vital, physical, the psychic are not subconscious in this sense, but they can be spoken of as subliminal. It needs the intuitive heart, the inward turn. It needs the power of a spiritual gaze. Else, to our waking mind's small moment look, a goalless voyage seems our dubious course. Some chance has settled or hazarded some will. And this is the understanding of most human beings, that without the power of a spiritual gaze, it seems to our waking mind's small moment look a goalless voyage. Why are we here? Why do I have to go through suffering? Why do I have to go through pain? Why do I have to go through hatred and all these dualities, love and hate and good and bad and hot and cold? In the spiritual realms of consciousness, there are no dualities. Once we rise into that first part, the higher mind, we'll see that there is no duality. Everything is a complementary of the other. So pain and joy are complementary in those higher realms. We cannot see it like that because we live in the duality. Or a necessity without aim or cause, unwillingly compelled to emerge and be. Now, this is something that the Buddhists have practiced for years. This earth to them is an illusion. Why be bothered with it? Throw it away and reach the divine silence, the perfect silence, and reside there. It's the same with the Advaitists. But Sri Aurobindo says, no, there is much further to go. This earth is chosen by the divine to be the center, the home of a life divine. And it will be transformed into a beauty that we cannot even imagine. Man also will be divinized and be a part of this new consciousness. But understand that it will be a very small group in the beginning. Only those who have arisen through all these realms of consciousness into the supermind. When I asked Ranganathan last night, do you think anyone in the ashram has risen to that height? He said, I believe only Nolini. In this dense field, where nothing is plain or sure, our very being seems to us questionable. Now, why is that? Well, we don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know what will happen last week. We don't remember what happened 5 years ago. We don't remember anything. We're living in a present in which we're unknowing, moving unconsciously towards the future, which we also don't know. It's only because we have Mother and Sri Aurobindo, and they explain to us where we are going, that we can get out of this morbid aspiration, this morbid example of a darkness of eternity. We have many philosophies that deal with these things, that there is no future, and so there is a truth in that, because certainly the Buddhists and the Advaitists have found their peace, but they never mention God. It is we who must find God in that peace. In this dense field, where nothing is plain and sure, our very being seems to us questionable. Our life, a vague experiment. The soul, a flickering light in a strange, ignorant world. Robert Heinlein wrote that book, I don't know if you read it, about Stranger in a Strange World. Quite an interesting science fiction book. So now we're on to page 50. The earth, a brute mechanic accident. A net of death, in which by chance we live. All we have learned appears a doubtful guess. The achievement done, a passage or a phase, whose farther end is hidden from our sight. A chance happening, or a fortuitous fate. Fortuitous, produced by chance. And that is certainly the truth of most of our lives. The achievement done, a passage or a phase. And the achievement done, who will remember any of us in 50 years? Unless we're a great scientist or a great visionary, no one will remember. But we know that there are the Akashic records, in which everything that happens on earth is recorded. Everything. The good, the bad, everything. And so, if one really wanted to understand history correctly, one could ascend to those Akashic records and see exactly the truth of what happened at any era. Out of the unknown, we move to the unknown. Ever surround our brief existence here, and look, he says brief existence. What, 70, 80, 100 years? It's nothing. Ever surround our brief existence here, gray shadows of unanswered questionings. The dark, inconscious, signless mysteries stand up unsolved behind fate's starting line. And there's a lot about fate. And I'll just read one rather long letter from Sri Aurobindo, but it's extremely important. The Indian explanation of fate is karma. We ourselves are our own fate through our actions. But the fate created by us binds us. For what we have sown, we must reap in this life or another. Still, we are creating our fate for the future, even while undergoing old fate from the past in the present. That gives a meaning to our will and action, and does not, as European critics wrongly believe, constitute a rigid and sterilizing fatalism. But again, our will and action can often annul or modify even the past karma. It is only certain strong effects called utkata karma that are not modifiable. And I have looked that up, and in 2 instances, they are not modifiable: murder and suicide. And Mother has written that those who murder or commit suicide will have to go through 7 births before that is expunged. Here too, the achievement of the spiritual consciousness and life is supposed to annul or give the power to annul karma. For we enter into union with the will divine, cosmic or transcendent, which can annul what it had sanctioned for certain conditions. New create what it had created. The narrow, fixed lines disappear. There is a more plastic freedom and wideness. Neither karma nor astrology therefore points to a rigid and forever immutable fate. An aspiration in the night's profound, seed of a perishing body and half-lit mind, uplifts its lonely tongue of conscious fire towards an undying light forever lost. Only it hears, sole echo of its call, the dim reply in man's unknowing heart, and meets, not understanding why it came or for what reason is the suffering here, God's sanction to the paradox of life. And Sri Aurobindo uses paradox all through Savitri. And the riddle of the immortal's birth in time. I'll continue a little longer so we can get this concept of where we are, who we are in essence, in truth, and how we are going to achieve divinity. Along a path of eons serpentine, of course eons are immeasurable periods of time, and serpentine is, of course, having the twisting, winding course like that of a snake. So the eons are never straight. They're always winding. We take a step forward or two and then one step back. But always we are moving forward, even when we don't realize it, even when we turn away from the truth. Sri Aurobindo says, we will return and achieve. He is never negative. In the coiled blackness of her nescient course. Well, now he's going to lead us into how the divine Shakti is creating this universe. In the coiled blackness of her nescient course, the earth goddess, the divine mother, who has come down onto the earth and is creating as nature, is toiling across the sands of time. A being is in her whom she hopes to know. A word speaks to her heart she cannot hear. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. Now, you say, if this is the Divine Mother, why does she have all these problems? She hopes to know something, she cannot hear the word, and the fate that's compelling her, she cannot see its form. Well, in the involution, everything is perfect. Nothing is false, awkward, in error. But as the evolution begins after the involution, the possibility of error becomes possible. Because what happens is that from nescience, the complete nothing of matter, somehow life arises. Because it's the divine who is creating these possibilities of exploration for himself. So he creates this manifestation of billions of people to see, to enjoy this play, this Leela. So nature is constantly creating and destroying at the same time. And that's very interesting, you see. If you take it apart, you will see that the dinosaurs came and then they were destroyed because a different being came, a higher being. So at the same time, if you bring it closer and closer and closer, you cannot tell when creation and destruction is taking place. And of course we have Shiva and Vishnu all at work in those aspects, destruction and creation. In her unconscious orbit through the void, out of her mindless depths, she strives to rise. A perilous life her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows. arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights. A trembling gladness that is less than bliss invades from all this beauty that must die. Now we see that, why does he say invades from all this beauty that must die? And what invades? A trembling gladness, but it's still less than bliss. It's less than ananda. Because all this beauty must die for a greater beauty to be born. And that's what we are seeing in the world today. We're seeing the attempt of the asura. You can call him the devil, you can call him evil, you can call him darkness, whatever, attempting to hold on against the power of the supramental light, which is impossible. And so things are breaking down. And now we have the Abraham Accords, in which 5 different nations are joining Israel in peace. And there'll be more very soon, joining very soon. So there's going to be an end to the great wars, or at least those that we see in Russia and Ukraine, Iran, Israel, and some in Africa. That will end. My teacher, Aurobindo Basu, told me there will always be small wars because man is growing very slowly, and there are hierarchical stages of humanity. Some are here, some are here, some are higher, some are much higher, but we're all working towards the same goal, the divinization of matter and humanity. And I've used my time today, so this is a good place to end. And we'll continue next week for the last line here on page 50. And we'll continue for a long time on the secret knowledge. It's always been one of my most important cantos, because it's sandwiched in between Sri Aurobindo's experiences, his learnings, and his ultimate revelations. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was about the karma. You said that murder cannot be exempted from the law of karma. So then, like in a war, for example, when a soldier kills another soldier, is that
No, that's not murder.
Oh, what is
No.
murder then? Is
Murder is the conscious killing of someone like that.
but like a soldier intentionally kills another.
Yes, but that's because he's a puppet
Oh,
who is guided by higher, or not more intelligent, but more powerful beings. Yes.
2 questions.
Sure.
The first one with regards to ignorance, where you
A little louder.
you mentioned we're living in darkness and ignorance, and you specified 3 particular things: body, life, and mind.
Yes.
Why life, and what alternate word could you use to replace this? For
No, Sri Aurobindo uses exactly those terms, and he tells us that, you see, body is not conscious at all. Yeah, we have people who do exercises, and we have bodybuilders and things like that, but that's only a physical aspect. It's not an aspect of consciousness. And this is what Mother worked on for 23 years after Sri Aurobindo's passing. The transformation of the physical cells of the body. Now, she said something very interesting. She said, any being, any person on earth who is open to the transformation, these cells will unite with their cells. Wow. Amazing. And it's happening. When we look at these young children, 3 years old, 5 years old, playing incredible concertos with their little fingers, this is a sign of the supramental action. Definite, clear sign. These children who solve math problems that have not been solved for centuries, they do like that. So, even though we cannot see this happening because we live in the ignorance, just above it's easily seen. You had a second question.
Does free will exist?
Does free will exist? Well, partially. We can decide to move this chair of our own will. Can we rise into the spiritual realms of consciousness? No. That would need complete surrender to the divine presence. And surrender is never a negative or a pejorative word. It's always positive, and it's always joyous. But it's the most difficult thing of all, because one has to get rid of the ego. And the ego is what made us what we are. So how do we get rid of it? Only by a surrender to something that is higher than us, than our ego.
But that higher is also within us.
Yes, and how do we find it?
We need to access it.
Silence, especially silence of the mind, calm, prayer. These are some ways, many ways. Detachment. Well, thank you for coming.